Tonight's shir is sponsored by Rabbi Aaron David, and Bina Poston, in honor of the rabbi's second grandson, Mazel Tov, born this morning in Tel Aviv by his daughter Elisheva and Chagai Rosilio. With God's help, be a source of pride and joy to his family and the entire Jewish people. Then I have here Mishaberach Havasein Avram Yitzchak Yaakov Moshe Aaron David Shlomo Hiroch Zoisho Hayoledes Elisheva Perel Bas Leah Viz Beno Hanoilot Lo B'Mazel Tov Ba'avor Sobo Yitein Etztok Ba'ado Beli Neder B'Schar Zeh Yizku Ove V'Imoy Lachnisa B'Brisoy Shel Avram Avinu B'Itoy U'Zmano U'Legadla L'Torah U'Lechop U'Lemais M'Tovim B'Nemar Amen.
Amen.
Also, additionally, Yiboneh is having a Matanot Levyonim fundraiser and Kimcho de Pischa Drive for families in need for the upcoming holidays of Purim and Pesach. A link to contribute can be found in the YouTube description box below and on the Yiboneh website. 100% of the funds are distributed directly to those in need. Please give generously. You can take that. Also, this year should be a blessing and a merit for the health and success of the families of Regina Bas Yosef Reuven and Yeshaya ben Yisrael Binyamin Wolf ben Tzvi Hersh Baruch ben Binyamin Wolf. Shemi Fa'aliyas Neshama. Okay. Next week is Purim. Now, if you ask people, what is Purim really all about? Well, they'll tell you. It's really a dramatic story, obviously. You know, you don't have to be too much of a learned scholar to know what Purim is about, because it's really, it's a story, right, it seems to be a Hatzalah, rescue. They were threatened with genocide by this Grand Vizier. His name is Haman, Persian, not Prime Minister, but he certainly was a Grand Vizier. Maybe he was the Prime Minister. And he, of course, threatened the Jewish people. We know that. And we have two people, Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai being the hero and Esther being the heroine, of course, were involved in Hatzalah, saving the Jewish people. It's really what it is. It's a dramatic story where there was an attempted genocide, obviously, and they saved the Jewish people. So we celebrate that, of course, on the 14th and the 15th of Adar. So if you asked anybody, what is Purim really all about? Well, that's basically what it is. But I will tell you something very interesting. If you think that's what Purim really is, you are wrong. You're really very wrong. Now you're going to look at me and say, what? Well, that's what it says in the Megillah. Like, what are you talking about? It says that in the Megillah. So am I going to defy the Megillah? No. But as so many things in life, you know, we think we have the correct interpretation of events, but really we don't. There's something much deeper, much more hidden going on. And the truth is that if you want to really celebrate Purim, you need to know what's called the hidden story. And that's what I'm here to tell you, the hidden story. And believe me, it has nothing to do with what you know, which is always amazing. But the beauty of the real story, or I should say the hidden story, the beauty of that story, when you do understand that, is that it enables you to understand all the mitzvahs of Purim. You see? Because I'm sure you probably asked yourself, wait a minute, okay, it's a rescue story. It's happened so many times to the Jewish people. Why do we have all these halachas? Let's take a look at some of these halachas. You ask yourself, what does it have to do with Purim? You see? So what that really tells you, right, is that you don't really know what Purim is about, or else you would understand why you have these halachas. You see? Very important idea. Well, let's take a look at some of the halachas, you know. I mean, the first question we could ask is, what is the essence of Purim? You know, what really is Purim really all about? And as I just said, it's not what you think. Another question, we know that there's a mitzvah of mishloach manos, which means to give, right, two things to a neighbor or a friend and so on, you know. I mean, it's nice to receive gifts, but what does this have to do with Purim, right, and so on, you know. So that's strange. Then there's matonos le'avyonim. Matonos le'avyonim is to give gifts of charity to poor people. Like I said, it's always nice. What does it have to do with Purim? Like what did somebody just said to himself, it's not a bad idea to give money to charity. But remember, the halachas must be connected to Purim to have any meaning. You can't just pick out a mitzvah and decide to appendage it to Purim. That's not the way Yom Tovim, holidays, work. We know all holidays are very mystical. You can use the word Kabbalistic, whatever. Something else is going on here, you know. So you have those questions, right? And then you have costumes. Why are people wearing costumes? What do we want to do? Imitate Halloween? Is that what it's all about? You know, we're jealous because they got costumes, right? So we need some of that stuff too. Is that what it's about? I don't think so. So why costumes? You see. Then we have a very interesting mitzvah, to get drunk. Or, more accurately, it's not so much to get drunk, you have to get drunk until the level of adil yoda, that you cannot distinguish. You know, you are so drunk that you can't distinguish between, right, Baruch Mordechai, blessed is Mordechai, and Ora Haman, cursed is Haman. You know, I mean, that's a strong level of being drunk. Very strong level. So the question then is, of course, what kind of, I mean, it's a very interesting mitzvah, don't get me wrong. It's always nice to get drunk, right? In fact, some people, they anticipate Purim to such an extent that they're drunk the first half a year, and then after Purim's over, they get drunk the last half of the year. They're always ready for the mitzvah, right? So the question is like, what does this have to do with Purim? You know, but the criteria is also interesting. The criteria, the level of being drunk, is where you don't know the difference between blessed Mordechai and cursed Haman. So there are two concepts here, or mysteries. Why do you have to get drunk altogether? And the second one is, who came up with this, you know, this criteria for how drunk you have to be? You know? So that's another, you know, really big problem with Purim and so on, you know. And then, of course, we have the Megillah, which is critical, obviously. Everybody has to hear the Megillah, which really is the story of the rescue, right, of the Jewish people and so on, you know. But there's an interesting concept also, you know. You know, if you have a war, for instance, right, there's a war with an enemy. Who was the enemy of the Jewish people? It was the Persians. It was Ahasuerus, the king, Haman, of course, the Grand Vizier, and it was the Persian people. You see, because they allowed the Persians to kill the Jews, right? For 2 days, the 13th and the 14th of Adar. And then the next day was a celebration. So normally when you have a war, what do you have? You know, you have 1 day for celebration. It's one war, one enemy, you have one day. Why is Purim 2 days? You ever think about that? Really what it should have been, right? The Persians fought the Jews on the 13th, so they naturally would celebrate it on the 14th, fine. But then the Jews of Shushan also fought the Persians on the next day, which is the 14th, and therefore they commemorated, or rather they were victorious on the 15th. So you would say, well, let's pick one day to celebrate the war. It's one war and one enemy. All right, so which day would we pick normally? The 15th, because that ended the war, right? You had the rest of Persia. Then you had the war on the 14th, so they were victorious on the 15th. So you have one day called the 15th. Why do we have 2 days? Anybody ever thought about that? What's this 2-day business? Interesting question. Is that by accident? I mean, are we going to say, well, everybody wants to get drunk to such an extent we need 2 days, right, to get drunk? No, I don't think so. So that's the question, you see? Now, all of these questions have to pop up in your mind for the average thinking man or woman. What's going on here? You know? And so on, you know? So there's a lot of ideas, a lot of questions that you can ask about Purim itself, you know? Then, all depends. Then there's the story of Amalek. You know, Haman is Amaleki. It's an Amalekite. Now we know the Amalekite, they're called the Amalekis, the Amalekites. They go really far back, all the way when the Jews left Egypt. The Amalek, the nation Amalek, attacked the Jews, right? So that's. But I'll tell you something interesting. If the Torah did not write that when the Jews left Egypt, Amalek attacked the Jews, right? I would never believe it. Makes no sense. Why? Let me show you why it makes no sense for Amalek, the Amalekites, to attack the Jews. In fact, it's insane. You know, maybe that's what we expect of the world. You know, insanity. But this is really insane. Why? Well, the first thing you have to remember is the Jews just left Egypt. And however they did it, they slaughtered the Egyptians. The Egyptians are the greatest nation on earth. Tutankhamun, well, he was pretty, you know, Ramses. These were no pushover people. They were the supreme nations of the world at that time, right? And so on. So the question is, they were supreme. What did the Amalek and the Jews kill them? They slaughtered them. Forget about how. But they can easily what's called replicate that slaughter to the Amalek. So basically, when you think about it, it's a suicide trip. Think about that. You're going to war with a nation that just killed the greatest nation on earth? Come on, you crazy? It's a suicide trip. Why would Amalek do that? They're not crazy, you see? So automatically you say to yourself, this makes no sense. You don't go to war to die, you go to war to be victorious. First question. It's very interesting questions. The second question, right, is what did they do? They fight with the Jewish people, you see. But why? What's your motive? Now, most people do that because of either it's for money, cash, tribute, as they say, right? Or they fight with other people because they're threatened by those people. But think about that. The Jews didn't threaten Amalek. In fact, the Chazal tell us that Amalek had to pass 5 different countries to get to the Jews. That means the Jews were not a military threat to Amalek. So what are you fighting with them? They're not a military threat to Amalek. So why would Amalek want to kill the Jews? It doesn't make sense. You don't fight with people that don't threaten you, right? So that's another question. Then there's another question. Do you know what it cost? If they had to go through 5 countries to get to the Jews, well, let me answer this. Why did they fight? So you could say, well, it was a religious war, right? Amalek believed in their deity, and the Jews believed in their deity. Okay, so live and let live. People make a mistake. Amalek was not atheist. Nobody was an atheist in ancient history. They were all pagans. Paganism is not atheism. They just believe in polytheism, which is many gods. Right? So what are you fighting the Jews for? You don't like their God? Fine. Okay. You don't go to war with them, especially when you know you're going to drop dead, because they're going to kill you guys, right? What's the point of the war? Because Jews were theists and Amalek were theists, except they believe in paganism. So why are you going to war? They're not atheists warring with theists. You see? So the question is, why are you fighting the Jews? They got their God, you got your God. What's the problem here? You know what I'm saying? I mean, you think about Rome. You know how many gods were worshipped in Greece and Rome? That's 50 gods running around, you know? And we know, I don't want, you know, remember the god. Mercury, well, not Mercury, he's a low guy. You had Jupiter, you know, and Zeus, and then what anyway. You have all these guys running around, you know, and so on, you know. So why do this? Doesn't make any sense, because they both believe in God. So what's the war about? It's another question. Another question. Do you know what it costs to mount a war? The United States went to war with Iraq, all right? Or whatever, Saddam Hussein. So what did they do? Only the US could do this. They took their entire army and brought it over to Iraq. You know what that costs? $2 billion a day. You got that kind of cash lying around? It's a fortune in order to transport. So if Amalek needed to fight the Jews that were 5 countries away, do you have any idea what kind of cash that cost? And there was no reason for it. It cost them a fortune to supply their army 5 countries. And we're talking about a wilderness. It's not like that grocery stores that they can steal the food, right? There's no supermarkets on the way. We're talking about a wilderness. So why do that? It's insane. It cost them unbelievable amount of money to war with the Jews. And not only that, the Jews had how many? Right? We know 600,000 men, right? There must have been over 2.5 million Jews. How many Amaleks were there? I don't believe there were 2 million Amalekis. They were a tribe in the Middle East. So why are you fighting with these guys? I mean, just think about all these questions. Any one of which says, this story never happened. Why would anybody make a war this way? Yeah, we know it happened. The Torah says Eidos, that it happened. And the last question I will ask you is, why does God hate them so much? You know, there's a lot of people that want to kill the Jews. You see, there's a lot of people that hate God, who want to kill the Jews or evil countries, you know. But we find that God has a particular hatred, animosity for Amalek. Because the version says an incredible thing, that my kisei, Kiyod al Kesko, right? Their hand is against the throne of God. He points them out. He points out singularly, Amalek, and you got to kill them. My throne is not complete until you wipe out every man, woman, and child. That's the mitzvah of Amalek. Can you imagine what that is? In other words, they have become incredible enemies of God. Why them? Man, there are many countries in the world that have this problem with, but why does God hate them more than anything? You see, it's a very important mystery. Clearly then, there's something about Amalek, right, that deserves the incredible hatred of the creator of the universe. I mean, we're not looking at some man or something like that. We're looking at a being that created the universe, everything, all creation. So if he hates you, right, then he knows exactly why he hates you and what there is about you to hate. What is it? Very important for us to know what gets God riled up to the extent where he wants everybody slaughtered. You see? And God doesn't do that. God really, in many ways, loves mankind. But not Amalek. Why? Now I asked you a whole bunch of questions. You see? You're probably all waiting for the answers, right? Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I don't have the answers to any of this. No, joking around, don't get worried. The interesting thing, the challenge here is not to answer the questions. I mean, that's itself an incredible challenge. The challenge is to answer all of these questions with one answer, where everything clicks. That's the challenge. Very hard. I've asked so many questions from so many different directions, right? Like, how in the world are you going to answer with one logical theme all of these questions? And they all have to fit logically. It's got to be tight, right? So, from all of these questions, we now begin to realize, right? We don't really know what Purim is about. Purim is obviously basically about Amalek. Now, I could ask you other things about Amalek. Who? Haman. Who is this character? And this guy's the Grand Vizier. We know that Ahasuerus was the king of the entire planet. It was the last time that all the Jews were under one kingdom. I don't know if you realize that. He was the chief, the king of 127 countries. That's incredible. One guy was the sovereign of all. You know what I'm saying? So it's very difficult to understand. Haman was a very powerful figure. He was the Grand Vizier. He's the second most powerful man in the world. If you think about that, we're not talking here about some schlepper. We're talking about the guy that's the second most powerful man in the world, right? So what does he do? He's walking and he sees this guy, Mordecai, right? And Mordecai decides, I'm not going to bow to this guy, right? So what happens to Haman? He says to the one of his guys, his officers, whatever, who's that guy? He's not bowing, the Grand Vizier? He says, yeah, he told Mordecai, yeah, he's a Jew. So right then and there he decided, he's Jewish? Oh, I got to kill him? No, it's not enough. I got to slaughter every man, woman, and child. Is this guy crazy? You don't like Mordecai? Okay. What's the normal response? You get rid of the guy, right? Why do you want to take it out? I mean, talk about racism. He's like the greatest racist of all. You're going to kill every man, woman, and child because he didn't bow to me? What's Mr. Meshiga? So it doesn't make sense. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense unless the guy's got a crackpot. But I want to tell you something. We're not talking here about a crackpot, right? He became Grand Vizier, right? You know how intelligent he has to be the Grand Vizier? Tremendously intelligent. So why would he do that? First question. You see? Second question. Why all of a sudden did he concoct this plot when they told him Mordecai was Jewish? That's when he said, really? Okay, so then he plots to kill every man, woman, and child Jew. Okay, so he's Jewish, so what? What does that have to do with the slaughtering his entire people? You see? And then there's another question about Haman, which doesn't make any sense. There's 127 countries, right, that Ahasuerus is the king of. That's enormous. 127 countries, right? Now, we know that each country had its own language. It says that in the Megillah. They sent out these letters in all the languages, right? There could have been 100 languages. Not only were there 100 languages, there could have been what? 100 different religions. Each country has its culture, its language, right? And they had to send out, when they did send out, the Megillah says, they had to send out to every Kiksovam, everything in their language, obviously in their style and so on, So what does Haman go? Haman goes over to Ahasuerus because he's the Grand Vizier. He can't kill Jews unless he gets the permission of the king, right? So he says to the Ahasuerus, you don't want these guys, right? You don't want them. They have their own religion, their own belief system, right? So what do you need them for? Are you going to tell me, what do you mean? They pay tax. Do you know how much money they paid? Jews even in those days made nice money, right? And so on, So what do you want to kill these guys, right? So therefore Haman says, yeah, no problem. In order to compensate the tax and all that these guys give, I give 10,000 talents of silver or whatever, which is, I think historians estimate that was worth $100 million. I mean, he was fabulously wealthy, Haman, for obvious reasons. You see? So the question is, Achashverosh, the king, should have said to him, what, are you crazy? What do you want to kill them for? Because they have their own belief system, their own religion? So does the other 126 countries. What are they zerka to be destroyed? Think about that. The guy's a king of 127 Medinas, right? And that's Haman's taina? Because they have their own religion and their own belief system and so on, and they don't observe the religion of the king. Fine, neither does the other 126. So what did he say to Achashverosh where Achashverosh agreed? Think about that. What was the message that he gave to Achashverosh that he agreed? It's astounding. It's hard to believe that this is a real conversation taking place, and that these two guys are not nut jobs or insane people. Doesn't make sense. And they're not stupid people, basically, you see. Anyway, so those are the questions even of Haman. We don't understand Haman, what's going on here, and so on. So, if you really sit down and analyze the story, you cannot make heads or tails of Haman, Amalek, right? And all the other minhagim and customs and so on that don't seem to bear any real relationship to the story of the Hatzalah. See? So it's the tough job to figure out what is going on. So what is going on? That is the question. What you have to know is there's a certain principle. The Jews have a certain mission. Obviously, I've said it many times, the mission of the Jew is to bring God back to the planet where he conceals himself, to bring spirituality to the world. What does that mean? It means to declare and reveal that really the real reality of the world, right, is ruchnius, is spirituality. There's another universe out there. There's another dimension that is spiritual. And that spiritual dimension of reality is inhabited by who? By God, right? And at a lower level, obviously, by angels. It's another reality, you see? And our job is to convince the world, right, that that's the real reality. And that's the reality we want to subscribe to, you know, because that's in that reality, there's eternal life. Obviously, that's what we really want. That's called tikkun, to rectify creation, where God concealed himself. And that's our job, is to reveal. In order to do that, the Jews have certain spiritual missions, spiritual tasks, which they need to do to accomplish. What happens if they do it? Phenomenal. But what happens if they fail? What happens if God gives them a mission, the Jewish people as a nation, and they fail? But what's going to happen? No good. Because the mission that God gives them is critical to do this particular spiritual achievement. You don't do it, you need another attempt. It's not that God says, oh well, I'll dismiss them. No. Then what the Baruch Shem will do is give them another chance to succeed in the spiritual mission. And that chance can take place hundreds of years later in order to create the proper circumstances where they can then do it. Very important concept. Okay, so what happened in the beginning? Well, in the beginning there was Matan Torah. Jews left Egypt, right? And they're now standing in front of Mount Sinai, Har Sinai, and God says, I'm going to give you the Torah, which is the essential idea of the whole Egyptian bondage or whatever. And what were the Jews supposed to do? Say, oh, great, give us the Torah, and we will observe it. Did the Jews say that? Yes. They said, Nasa v'nishma, right? Nasa means we will do the Torah, right? And then v'nishma, we will understand. That was tremendous because they accepted it without even knowing what it says. right? Nasir, and we'll do it anyway. Then Vinishma, we will try to understand what it's all about, right? That would have been, so God wanted them to accept the Torah out of love, and that's really what they did, right? But then it says also, right, that God took the Tachasoho, that the Jews did not accept the Torah. They did not. And because it says that the Jews at a certain point did not accept the Torah. So there's a Tosfos, one of the commentaries asks, it's a contradiction. One place it says they accepted the Torah, what's called a superlative acceptance. And then that's number one. And then in another place, it indicates that they did not accept the Torah. You see, because the Medrash says that what God did when they said, no, we don't want it, he took Mount Sinai and he ripped it off its base. Imagine, and the mountain, he takes the mountain, the whole mountain, right? And he puts it over the head of the Jews. And he says, you accept the Torah, fine. You don't accept the Torah, right? I drop the mountain. It means I kill all of you. God threatened them with death if they don't accept the Torah. So Tosfos says, wait a minute, there's a contradiction here. Because it said that they accepted Torah out of love. Nasa and Ishma, right? So what is this? So Tosfos answers, so Torah Shabiksav, the written Torah, they accepted. When God wanted to give them the oral Torah, because the Torah itself has commentary, right? You need to understand many, many different aspects of the written Torah, because it doesn't say that in the written Torah. That's called the oral Torah, and so on. Mishnayos, Gemara, and so on. So that the Jews said, no, we don't want it. You see? So God says, you don't want it? I will take the mountain and I will bury all of you under it. You must accept the oral law. So the Jews obviously, exercising wisdom, said, okay, if you insist, no problem, right? But that was a pagam, a defect. What was the defect? That they accepted it out of fear, not out of love. And God wants them to accept the Torah because they recognized the importance and the beauty of the Torah. That was called a pagam. A pagam is a defect in Kabbalah Satira, in accepting the oral law. Big problem. So therefore the Jews, by doing that, failed in that aspect of the mission that they had to do. That's what they did. Fine. So God said, okay, that means I have to create another situation where you need to do a tikkun of that pagam. You need to rectify that mistake and fulfill the spiritual mission that you want the Torah, all of it, out of love. There you are. That's hanging in the history of the Jewish people, a defect in Kabbalah Satira. Very important concept. Now we have to ask ourselves, wait a minute, why didn't they want to accept the oral law? Well, why? Well, what's the problem? You accepted the written law, so why didn't you accept the oral law? Very important question. What was their problem? And the answer to that, and that's what I want to say, is because the Jews had a faulty understanding of what Torah is. What was the faulty understanding? They all recognized that Torah and the observance of Torah, right, is the way to grow in spirituality. That's what it is. And therefore to get Olam Haba, the future world. That's its primary achievement. Grow in spirituality, become holy, righteous, and so on. And then you will get the future world, Olam Haba. But the Jews said, wait a minute, okay, fine, we understand that. But why are there so many details? What do we need all the details for? I mean, the oral law adds tens of thousands of details to the written law. What do we need that for? Now you're going to tell me, well, you know what you need that for? I'll tell you why. Because you need to exist as a civilization. And all the laws, for instance, the laws of Choshen Mishpat, of civil, criminal justice, right? Marriage and divorce, all these laws you need for civilization. You need those laws in order for civilization to persist and have laws. So why do we need a Torah for that? All nations of the world have a legal system. Think about that. It begins all the way from Hammurabi, by Avram Avinu. All nations have a legal system. Why? Why do nations have a legal system? Right? Why are they a nation of laws? Because that's the only way they can exist, or else it's anarchy. Right? So, okay, we'll adapt the legal system of wherever we are. What do we need the Torah to tell us a legal system for? You see what they felt. Why do we need the Torah to give us what's basically a legal system, which is a system in order for society to survive? Because what is the reason for a legal system, right? For society to be able to survive, or else it's chaos, right? Fine. So either we'll adapt the legal system in which civilization can exist from the other nations, or we'll make up our own. But everybody has one, or else it's anarchy. So why do we need the Torah to give us a legal system? Interesting question. Why do we need the tens of thousands of details to have that? Because they saw there are two different things. There's a legal system, right, and of laws, and then there's a system of laws that foster spirituality, the future world, holiness, and so on. Two different systems. So Torah Shebe'al Peh, right, is basically a legal system. Enormous amount of details. This was their problem. So God said to them, you don't understand that the laws of the Torah, right, is not just to allow civilization to exist. That is what civilization needs. If your goal is not to become a holy nation, righteous and just, you're not going to make it. That is incorporated in the strivings of man, you see, to be able to do it, and so on. The laws of the Torah are not just that civilization can survive. That's the concept of legal. The concept of Torah is not legality, it's the concept of justice, righteousness, holiness, and that has to be part of the system that man governs himself through, you see. And that they didn't chap, you see. And God said, you don't understand. This is the only way civilization can survive. I mean, when you think about that, and just take a look at what's going on with America, the insanity of that country. And America has a whole legal system, right? We know that, Supreme Court. Yet these guys are turning America, right, into a zoo. It's basically what America is now. It's a zoo with all the animals. And the animals are the people running around, right? That's what it is. You ever hear of taking I'm sure you know it, you're taking a 6-year-old kid, he's in second grade, right? And you're telling them, by the way, you don't have a gender, you can decide whatever gender you want, right? That's exactly what's happening. It's a shocking of what is happening in the kindergartens, And then there's the destruction of the abortion. You can kill a kid even after it's born, within 24 or 48 hours. It's murder. It's infanticide, right? Then the lawlessness of America. There's crime all over the place, right? And then there's the insanity of the Congress, the Supreme Court, right? Well, I'm sorry, anybody can marry whoever they want. That's what's the law now, right? You cannot, and you can't even discriminate, right? What's going on here? I don't want to go into the whole 9 yards of this, but clearly America's legal system is destroying America. And that's what the Moshe is saying. You don't understand. If your system is not justice and holiness and righteousness, you don't have a legal system. You won't even survive. You think you will, you won't. But the Jews did not realize that. So God said, I need to wake you guys up. Right? So here's what I'm going to do. We'll wait 800 years. I got time, right? That's what the version says. Now I'm patient, right? Why? Because first of all, the Jews were in their own country, which Shlomo Amalek and all the kings of Israel, right? So they have their own system. What the version says, I want to show you what the system is in the lands of the Goyim, because that's the only way you could see the contrast between their system and what they look like because of their system. But the problem is Jews are not in Golus, right, for hundreds of years. Then they finally go into Golus when the destruction of the first temple, and they're in Babylon. But in Babylon, they're not equal citizens. They're basically slaves in Babylon with Doniel and the Nevi'im and so on. So when is the first time they became free citizens in a Goyish country? Persia, Media, Modai, which is the land of Ahasuerus. They were all free citizens, right? So what do the Jews do, right? The Jews now adapt the system of camaraderie with the Goyim, Persians. And the Megillah starts off with a display of the Jews of tremendous loyalty, patriotism, and camaraderie. They joined the Suda of Ahasuerus. They joined the guy's meal. He must have had an incredible meal, and so on, And yeah, who knows how many Jews joined that Suda, right? That's how the Megillah starts off, you see. Why does it start off with that? To show that the Jews believed in the validity of that civilization and of their legal system, right? So what happens? Fine. So all of a sudden, right, years pass, right? And there's a guy, Haman. What does Haman do? Haman walks over to, because of what happened with Mordechai, he walks over to Ahasuerus and says, by the way, let's kill the Jews and I'll get 10,000 talents of silver. Could you imagine the next day it's printed up in the Persian Times, right? Not the New York Times, the Persian Times, right? And it says, Ahasuerus has now decided and decreed, and he's given the ring to Haman, right? And he figured it out. The Jews will now be killed, right? It's Hefka. It's called a turkey shoot. You can now kill whatever Jew you want on the 14th day of Adar, whatever. This was the decree, and it was publicized, obviously, because everybody had to know to do it, right? What do you think the reaction of the Jews was in that event? They were stunned. So wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. We joined you at your Suda to show our loyalty. We pay tax. We're loyal people. We're citizens, right? And this is what you do? Where's your legal system? Why do we deserve to die? They were shocked. They were stunned and then frightened. What did they realize? They realized that the legal system of Persia or a legal system without Torah is bankrupt, you see. Because what they realized finally is that there's no justice in their legal system. It's legal but not just. There's no righteousness in the system of Persia. Remember, why do legal systems exist? In order for the civilization to continue. That's why they exist. But the problem is that it really only exists for what? For the civilization to continue. But what happens if the civilization will continue even if you violate all the laws? Why not change it? And that's what people do all the time, right? They change the system because it won't interfere with the continuation of the system. You see, Ahasuerus decided, I need the cash. I need the 10,000 talents of, right, and so on, And he decided to get rid of the Jews. Wait a minute, there must be a law in Persia somewhere that you can't kill people without a reason. I mean, somewhere there, right? But what's the problem here? Ahasuerus can change the law because it's not going to endanger the continuation of Persia. So why not? So the Jews said to themselves, what kind of legal system is this? You can't just change the law and kill everybody, genocide every man, woman, and children, right? Because you want to get some cash? What kind of system is this? And we've demonstrated loyalty. We ate, right? At your Suda, we pay tax, we're loyal, and so on. What are you doing? What kind of system is this? Aha. That's when they woke up. And they realized, God is right. If your system does not include justice, righteousness, and holiness, right? That system can be changed at the mere whim of anybody. You see, so really, what happened as a result? If that's the case, right, they realized that the bankruptcy of legal systems of the world. Therefore, you can only have Torah as a legal system. So besides the spiritual system, you can have it as a legal system. So they accepted the oral law with love. That's the key of Purim. That's what Chazal say. Kimu v'kiblu, right? They accepted what they had accepted previously. They now re-accepted it with love. That's the essence of Purim. God did it to show the Jews, this is what a goy's legal system is. Where you can be slaughtered one day, you can enjoy his meal one day, and the next day he's going to hang you up. Right? And the Jews realized that, and therefore the Jews accepted. That's why it says, La Yehudim ha'yisa oira. And to the Jewish people, oira. What's this oira? It should say to the Jews, why? La Yehudim ha'yisa simcha. Why? Because they were saved. Right? They were not going to be killed. Because now, right, Haman is dead, right, and so on. No, it says oira, light. They had an incredible enlightenment. What was the enlightenment? Because they realized the nature of all judicial system, how bankrupt it really is. And therefore, they brought a tikkun. They rectified the sin, right, or the pagam of not accepting the oral law with love. And they said, we will accept the oral Torah with love. That's Purim. That's the whole point of Purim. And God arranged it when they would be free men, right, in Persia, finally, and they would be equal to everybody else. I'm going to show you what the system is and what the Torah really is. And it was all that the Jews should accomplish, the spiritual mission that they failed to do 800 years before. That's Purim. You see? So when you think about that, Purim really wasn't about a Hatzalah, a rescue, right? Purim was a teaching moment. It's really what it was for. It's a teaching moment where God had to teach the Jews what is the nature of the oral law and how critical it is. So when you learn the oral law, kedushin, marriage and divorce, right, or vows, this is all part of holiness, righteousness, and justice. That's what it's part of. And that's the only way a civilization can survive. It's all part of the fabric of the Torah itself. That's what the Rebbeinu Shem did. And therefore the essence of Purim is that Purim is a tikkun, a rectification of a pagam, a failure of the Jews to understand what the Torah really is, and also to understand that the Torah, what it demands of the Jewish people, is really the only way, because it embraces kedusha, holiness, tahara, purity, you see, and righteousness and justice and so on. That's really what Purim is all about. A major lesson to the Jewish people. You see, you see. Now, believe it or not, now that you understand this, we can answer almost every single question just from that thought. Now that you're not looking at the rescue attempt, you're looking at a teaching moment that the Jews have to be enlightened. And the secret to that, where it says, Laihudim ha'isa oira, and to the Jews there was oira, light. What light? Like I said, should have said to the Jews there was simcha. What kind of light business? There was enlightenment. There was the wisdom of understanding why you need the oral law. And that was a tikkun, a rectification of the Jews' understanding of what the Torah really is. You see, just like God had to wait 800 years and demonstrated with Haman and Achashverosh and so on. But fortunately, the Jews got it, you see. So when Achashverosh took off the ring off his finger and gave it to Haman, that shook them up. Could you imagine if that happened in America? Where all of a sudden the Congress decided, well, let's kill the Jews, right? Somebody's going to give us $1 billion, right? We'll kill all the Jews and we'll get on with our life, right? What would America think, right? What would the Jews think? So first, of course, they would be shocked. Why? Shocked at what kind of a loyalty is this to the Jewish people? I mean, the Jewish people are very good citizens. They pay their taxes, they obey the law, they help America survive and so on. Where did you come up with to kill the Jews? For what? So some guy can give you cash? You see? The shock would be awesome. That's exactly what happened in Persia. Just think of what it would mean in modern day times, what it would mean in Persia. That's really what Purim is really all about. Remember, it's not so much a solo. It's not about rescue, right? It's about tikkun, to rectify the mistaken understanding of what the Torah is and what it desires, you see? Very important, very important. In fact, that lesson is so great that Chazal say that when they reach that understanding of what Torah really is, that's the only holiday that will be celebrated in the Messianic era. You believe that? I mean, what about Pesach, right? Shavuos, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah? No. Purim. Because Purim is the ultimate understanding of what the Torah really is. And that is the ultimate tikkun, you see. Very interesting. It's a whole different understanding of what Purim really is. So, well, Chazal said, wait a minute, because one of the questions you can ask is, what do we need Purim for? The Jews were saved many times. How come they didn't make all the other rescue attempts into a holiday? Why? You ever think about that? Why is this a holiday? You know how many times the Jews have been threatened and saved? Right, a lot of times. And the answer is, Chazal realized that if the Jews are rescued, they're saved, fine. You don't have a holiday. But if the rescue leads to an enlightenment that creates a tikkun, a true completion of a spiritual mission, that must be a holiday, because it brings down a new energy, the spheres. It brings down a tremendous tikkun into the world. And that needs a holiday. That's why Purim is a holiday, whereas others don't need the holiday, because it's merely a repeat, you see, of the old rescue business. But this was not a repeat, like I say. This was a tikkun, a rectification, a repair of a pagam, a defect that they had made 800 years before. And that is a new, like I say, tikkun. That needs a Yom Tov, where the Jews will continue understanding that. Very important idea about what it means. So therefore what Chazal did is they said, okay, we want the Jews to constantly remember the lesson of Purim. So let's see, now we're going to make laws, right? And those laws are designed, right, to make sure you understand what is going on. So let's take a look at some of the ideas that I had asked, right? So the first thing they realized is what? They said, we now know what the essence of Purim is. Not rescue, enlightenment. That's the real lesson of Purim. Fine. What about if we realize now that we're in it, we have to be in it for ourselves. All the Goyim have this legal system that they can just flip and throw away, almost like at a whim. Well, I can make cash if I violate the law, as long as it doesn't disrupt civilization, no problem, you see? So therefore, we want to create a halacha that will now unite the Jews in camaraderie. That's what we want to do. And what's the greatest way to get Jews to have great feelings for one another? Mishlach manas. You give a Jew a gift, so what's he going to feel about you? Wow, you actually gave me a great gift, right? Another 1,000 candy bars, whatever. All right, whatever that is, right? But what it is it's a gift. If you want to get somebody to endear yourselves to somebody, you give them a gift, right? Because that shows the expression of caring and so on. So Mishloach Manos became a mitzvah because that will now unite us, and we realize we're one people and we got to stick together. You see, and that's the same thing with Matanos Evyonim. You give, to Mishloach Manos for a regular, for an oni, you give him a tzedakah, charity, so that immediately will endear the person that you give it to you. In other words, what Chazal wanted to now enormously increase the unity of the Jewish people. Because in the end, it's all about us. Forget about the Goyim. You know, if they want, next day they get up in the morning and they're going to kill you. Which is, by the way, happens so many times. Look at Germany, right? The Jews were tremendously loyal citizens in Germany, right? And all of a sudden, this Michigan guy, Hitler, in 1933, comes out with the new laws. Right? Why? We're loyal citizens. We've been German citizens for years. And all of a sudden you decide to kill all the Jews? No, and so on and so forth. Because that's a goy. That's what a civilization is without being based on the Torah. That's what you can expect, And so where do you see that beautifully? By Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, he's going to the land of the Philistines, Plishtim, right? And he's going with his wife, who is a very beautiful woman, and he says to himself, I'm going to walk into Avimelech, the Plishtim, right? I'm going to come with this woman, right? They're going to kill me and take her, because that's what these guys do, right? So he told her to say, I want you to say, you're my sister. So my sister, okay, so you're a brother-in-law, right? So we won't kill you, right? So what happens? True to form, Abimelech takes the woman, right? And what does the Rebbe Hashem do? Starting up with the wrong God, right? He closes down basically every orifice in and everybody in the palace. Well, you can't last too long with that business, right? The kidneys don't like that kind of stuff, right? So all of a sudden he realizes, and he calls Avraham Avinu, says, "What are you doing? Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know she was your sister." So Avraham Avinu, so he says something very interesting to Avraham Avinu. So why'd you lie to me, right? We don't do this kind of stuff here, where we kill the men's wives, we take the women to ourselves, and we kill the guy. We don't do this kind of stuff. So what does Avraham Avinu said? It's very interesting what he said. It shows you the brilliance of Avraham Avinu. He said, you don't understand something. I went to this place, I checked out the place, right? And I saw, there's no fear of God. If there's no fear of God, that means the laws are not based on what's right, what's just, right? It's based on the preservation of society. It's based on legal, not spiritual, or anything that's really just. So therefore, guess what? You're the king. You can just say, well, I'm going to dismiss the law that we can't kill the guy and take his wife, because it doesn't interfere with the civilization. Because that's the concept of a legal situation where you can dispense with the law, you see. And Avraham Avinu said, there's no fear of God in this place, which means that this system has nothing to do with real justice. It's a legal system to preserve your civilization. And he was right. You see, he was right. Avraham Avinu was right. And when you think about that, you just look at the laws that are passed by America or even Israel and so on. How many laws that are passed are not just? It has nothing to do with justice. It accommodates different people, so they can benefit, profit, or whatever. I mean, this country is full of that kind of, just laws which are not just, and so on. It's certainly with America and so on, In fact, I can guarantee you that because of this concept, laws are made to benefit the people making the laws, right? You can be guaranteed that they will always be violated because everybody's bribed by his self-interest. You see, and because of that, laws in America, using that as an example, they're not just. There are a lot of ridiculous laws, right? And they're basically made to benefit the people making the laws, you see. In fact, I can guarantee you that every politician, any person who runs for politics, will ultimately be a crook because of his self-interest. He's biased, he's bribed, right? So what's the guarantee that a guy will not violate, right, justice? And the answer is, you need to fear God. That's it. If you fear God, then you know you will be accountable and you won't violate justice. You don't fear God, you're doing it because, well, civilization needs this to survive. I guarantee you, just give it a little more time, right? And you're going to be a crook and violate all the laws and so on. You know, it's called bribery and so on, you know, which is what happens. It's all the time and so on, especially with Biden. But anyway, but this is what Avraham Avinu said. There's no fear of God, so your laws are bankrupt, basically. And a proof of that is you just stole my wife, so what was I supposed to do? If I would have said that, right, that I'm her husband, you would kill me. No problem, you see? That's what the Jews realized, that laws are always subject to be changed based on the whims of the people who are in the authority and so on. So the first thing the Chazal did is that we need to increase the unity of the Jewish people. So Mishloach Manos, like I said, giving gifts to Jews and giving charity is the way to do it, you see. And therefore they issued those laws, you see. But then they had other ideas also in mind. And therefore we have to read the Megillah to realize what the lesson is of Purim and so on, you know. And then you have other ideas. Now, one of the ideas that they had to realize is Purim has no miracles. It has no miracles. In fact, the name of God is not mentioned once in the entire Megillah, which is rather bizarre, right? I mean, how could a book of the 24 books of the Bible not have the name God in it, right? The answer is because the concept of Purim is a new section, a new phase of Jewish history where God will perform miracles, right? But he won't perform the miracle openly, no more. There are no open miracles. They're all concealed. They're miracles and they're all concealed. And therefore God runs the world through that. And that's the concept of costumes. The costumes demonstrate, right, that God, right, that God is always in a costume, in the sense that he's always hidden. So even though he does everything, does all the miracles, but he, in that sense, he wears the costume of what's called teva, of nature, or randomness, chance, you see. In fact, that's why the Chazal named Purim the word Purim, from the word lottery. Why? Because it looks like Purim is what? Is chance, right? Haman drew lots, which day and month he would kill the Jews. Well, it just happens, right, that it happened. No. Purim is all about God running the universe without being obvious. Because for whatever reason, the Jews don't deserve an open miracle. Therefore, the name God is not anywhere in the entire Megillah at all. That's what Purim really is. So therefore, the costumes illustrate. You know, you wear a costume and everybody knows that behind the costume is you or somebody. Same idea, that behind nature is God. So nature is a costume of God. So we wear costumes to illustrate that, you see, which is a very important idea. Also, what's interesting, why does the Chazal want us to get drunk? Right? Adelo Yoda, where you cannot distinguish between Baruch Mordechai and Or Haman. Because think about this. Who directs everything? There is no such thing as randomness or chance. It's all dictated and determined by God. And we know that. If that's the case, why did God allow Haman to do this? Haman was a shliach. Not that he forced Haman to do it, but he used the free will of Haman, which he knew he would do, in order to get the Jews to do tshuva. And that's what they needed to do, right? How are they going to do tshuva? How are they going to realize what Persian law is all about? So what he did is he realized Haman wants to kill, Mordechai and the Jewish people. So he used Haman's free will for his own agenda. That's what he did. And that agenda is where, therefore, Haman, because he frightened the Jews and he taught them that lesson, God used that to allow the Jews to do the tikkun, to rectify the pagam, the defect of Kabbalah Satira. He actually used Haman. So Haman is really a shliach, you see. So what God is saying, you need to understand, right? There's no difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman. They are both doing the will of God. That's what we don't understand. Haman can do nothing to the Jews unless it is the will of God that God is using him for the agenda. You see? So it comes out that Haman is a shliach of God. The only difference is between Haman and Mordechai is Haman, since he's doing it for his own reason, gets no reward. Whereas Mordechai, who does it because that's the will of God, he therefore gets the reward. But really they're both agents of God. That's what we don't realize. So therefore one of the mitzvahs is to get drunk where you do not see the difference between Baruch Mordechai and Or Haman, because they're both agents of God. They're both shlichim of God to do his will. Except, like I say, Haman doesn't get the reward for that. Even though he got the Jewish people to do tshuva. That's what he did, which is astounding. If it wasn't for him, they would never have done tshuva, you see. So therefore, that's why you get drunk, right? And you do it to the extent where you do not know the difference. Because really, at the level of God, there is no difference between both. They're both acting on the agenda of God. Very interesting concept, you see. In fact, what's interesting is the gematria of Baruch Mordechai is equal to the gematria of Or Haman. Same numerical value, which is interesting, In any case, so we begin to understand how all of these mitzvahs, you see, are really connected to the real story of Purim, you see. Now I wanted to also point out something. I will show you that the story of Purim could never have happened. Same thing with Amalek, because I didn't get to that yet to answer that. Why is it Purim could never happen? Let me show you something. There's a thing called probability. What's the probability that an event could happen, right? Let me show you, and you tell me, do you think this event could happen? Okay, are you guys ready for this? It's a very interesting understanding of what is happening. I want to make sure I don't skip. Okay, let me just show you that Purim could never really happen, and that's the proof that God directs what's happening. First of all, how does everything start? With Vashti, right? So the story goes, right, that he's having this Suda, right? Okay. So Vashti, the king's request, which is impossible to understand. He says, well, Vashti is a beautiful woman. I need her to appear in front of all my officers completely undressed, forgive my unsneeristic statements, she's got to appear completely undressed, right? Is he out of his mind, right? Who is Vashti? We don't understand who this woman was. Vashti, right, is his wife. Imagine a guy says, well, I need my wife to appear undressed in front of all the other men. This guy out of his mind. Not only that.
1 second, Rabbi. Just turn it to the right. No, just the top. Yes? Like turn it the other way. That's it. Bezrat Hashem.
Not only that, but what is so remarkable, right, is Vashti is the queen. What kind of authority can she have if this is the way she appears in front of all the guys? Is it crazy? I mean, it's insane. And not only that, who was Achashverosh? He was a general. He was not royal material, right? But he married Vashti, who either was a daughter or I think a granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. So Vashti was the only claim to fame or claim to legitimacy of Achashverosh. So he wants to kill her. She's his only claim to the throne. Yet he killed her. So the first thing is, whoever heard of a guy making that request? It's insane. So that's the first probability. Could never happen. The second thing is, what does he wind up? Kills her. Because she disobeyed his orders. Right? Why can he kill her? She's your only claim to the throne itself. So how can you kill this woman? That's the second totally improbable event, right? So what does Achashverosh decide? They advise him, well, why don't you just take a regular commoner, a woman? No, royalty doesn't take commoners. They take only people of high stature, you see? Usually it's to ally other countries together and so on, right? So why would Achashverosh even think about marrying a common woman like Esther? So that's a third idea that which should not have happened. Then the fourth idea is a beauty contest, right? Excuse me. You know, I mean, beauty contests are in America. You know, Miss America and all that. You have kings doing beauty contests. That's not what motivates them. It's absurd. So that's another thing that can't really happen, yet it did, right? Then the fifth miracle is Esther wins. You have any idea how many women vied to be the queen of the greatest king in the world? There are millions of women, right? It took a whole year for this guy to go through all those candidates and so on, right? This is incredible. And Chazal say that Esther had a green complexion. Now, I don't know what that means, but maybe green was in it those days, you know? But she won. And she was an older woman. She was not a young woman when she won. Really? How did she win? Millions of women vied for that honor. So the fifth miracle is that she won, right? The next miracle is of all the people who rose to authority is Haman. It takes a lot to rise to become the Grand Vizier, yet he won. What is the probability that he would rise to be the Grand Vizier? And then the next miracle is Mordechai was exactly at the spot that Bigson and Seresh plotted to kill the king. Wow, boy is he lucky. Not only understood their language, because he was a member of the Sanhedrin and knew languages, right? He was exactly at the palace, right next to these guys, talking out loud about plotting to kill the king. What luck, right? And therefore he knew that they wanted to kill the king. What's the probability that he would actually hear this plot? You see, yet it happened, right? Fine, okay. So of course he informs the king, right, that Bigson Viserys wants to kill him, right? And he puts them to death, of course, right? And he writes it down in the Chronicles of Persia, right? But he doesn't reward him at all. You ever have a guy saving your life and you don't even offer a reward for this? I mean, hey, the guy just saved your life, right? How could you not give him a gift? He didn't. Achashverosh never offered Mordechai something, you see? Because if he would, Mordechai could never claim something else later on. You ever have a king, somebody saves his life, and he doesn't even say to the guy, you saved my life, let me give you whatever, $100,000 or whatever, or a dukedom, whatever, and so on. He never did. That's a ness. It's a clear violation of diplomacy. It's incredible, So that's, again, a miracle. And then, all of a sudden, Esther comes up with a scheme. She's going to have Haman and Achashverosh. They're going to get together for this little nice party. Okay. But what's interesting is the king can't sleep. Couldn't sleep, right? So, which itself is very interesting. Right before the party, the guy can't sleep. Okay, fine. But what is interesting, so what does he do? Right? What do people do who can't sleep, right? So of course, they go over the Chronicles of Persia and they read it, right? Isn't that interesting material to read the Chronicles of Persia? That's an interesting way to fall asleep, you see. And that's what he does. Goes over to the Chronicles, but the amazing thing is he pulled out the exact volume, right? And he opened up to the exact page where it says Mordechai saved the life of the king. Wow. If we talk about chance, it's impossible, right? And he couldn't sleep, so therefore he had to do something that was interesting, right? So he does that, right? And then all of a sudden, right, like I said, it opens the correct page, the correct volume. And then in order to get the king, started, because what Version wanted is Haman should be debased in front of the king. And that begins the idea that there's something wrong with Haman in Achashverosh's mind. Right? So what happens is, all of a sudden, now we know he couldn't sleep at night, so who comes to the palace? Haman. Why was Haman coming in the middle of the night? Because that had to be because he couldn't sleep, right? And then it says, Vayove Haman. And Haman came, right? That's interesting. What in the world is Haman doing coming to the king in the middle of the night? Because that's exactly what happened, right? So Achashverosh takes advantage of this and says, well, what would you do to a guy that you felt really saved the life of the king and so on, So what does Haman do? Now remember, Haman is not stupid, right? What were kings always afraid of in those days? That somebody would rebel and kill them. Everybody, that's why they used to kill their whole family, because they were afraid that the family would kill them. That's why they killed their brothers and sisters and mothers. It was astounding what they used to do, because they were afraid rebellion, right? So what is Haman's advice? I'll tell you what to do, right? You take the guy and you put him on your horse, you put the crown on his head, right? And so on, right? The crown on his head. And you get your guys to lead him, you put him on your horse, right? Now, would you give advice to a king that already suspects that maybe you want to kill him and take over the kingdom? Of course not, you crazy? You never say advice to a king that clearly indicates you want his horse, you want his garments, and you want his crown. What kind of stupid advice is that? Well, anyway, everybody's suspicious that the Grand Vizier wants to take over. What, is he crazy? But that's exactly what he offered him. So what do you think Achashverosh is thinking? Huh? Was he out of his box? He's crazy? He wants a... It clearly indicates, right, that he's probably thinking of himself, and he wants to do this in preparation to be the king after me. And he's going to knock me out and become the king. She actually gives Achashverosh the reason to believe that he's plotting to overthrow the king. So of course that immediately begins the debasement, right? The deterioration of Haman, which is what the Rebbe wanted because of the next idea of the story of the party itself, So that itself is a ness. How in the world can he tell that, right? So what happens next, right? So all of a sudden you find Haman leading Mordechai through the streets with the crown and the levush and so on and so forth, So automatically that places Haman in a terrible, embarrassing and debasing situation, right? So therefore the king now sees Haman in a very different light. And he's already suspicious of the guy, you see? You just think about these things. They don't, in many ways, they don't make sense. And then, okay, so you want to go the next day and tell the king you want to kill Mordechai and so on. Okay, so wait for the guy to give you an order. No, he's got to build a gallows 50 amos high. By the way, it's like 150 feet high. Why don't you wait? No. And it had to be built right then. So when Charvena said to him, and by the way, he's already got the gallows ready, so therefore he could say, hang him on it, because it was already built. You don't even have to, he didn't even have time to cool off, right? Hey, hang him, you know? Haman literally provided him with the perfect plot to get himself killed. It's astounding what the Baruch did. So he wouldn't have a chance to be able to kill Mordechai. And then of course you have the party, and finally in the second party Esther says to him, well, you know, he's the Russia and so on and so forth. So what does he do? He falls on her bed. Now the last thing you want to do is fall on the bed of the queen. That's not a very safe place to be, you know, especially, you know, and he did. Okay, it's a medrash that the Amalek pushed him, whatever, but, you know, that's the worst possible place to be when the king already is enraged about what you want to do with his wife, you know. So it's just, you read this story, you can't believe the mazel, you know, of Esther, you know. And all of a sudden the timing is incredible. He's on her bed, right? And the king walks in, right? That's the last place you want to be seen, on top of his wife, and him walking in to check this out. I mean, this is not a good place to be seen when the king already is enraged. So in comes this guy Chavona, and he says, by the way, he's already got his gallows ready. Oh, so Achashverosh doesn't even have time to cool off. Hang him, because he already has the gallows. I mean, you look at this story and say, you know, what a shlemazel Haman is. Of course he had no bechira. He was, the Ransham said, I'm now going to kill the guy. And I mean, you take a look at all these incidents, and you realize, can this story really happen? And so on. But it's not really. There's just too many incidents that are incredible coincidence. It can't really happen. You know, Esther's the queen, and so on, you know. And all the other miracles I pointed out, and so on. So from that you already see, they realize that the whole thing is a nes nigla. The whole story was something that really could not happen. And this is what everybody realized in the story of Purim. So the enlightenment itself was very important. What they realized, what a legal system is, you know. And then besides that, they realized that the whole thing is a nes, nigla, except it's governed by coincidences, you know. And a coincidence, by the way, is a miracle. Because what is a coincidence? Well, you have two causal chains that intersect at one event, and that's the exact event that you need for something to happen. So what's the probability that there are two different events, but they meet in one place, and you happen to need that place in order to take advantage of it, and so on? It's a nes. You see, it's a probability nes, and so on. But that's how the Rabbi Hashem runs the world, and so on, you know. In any case, this is what we see, that what Purim really is. Like I said, the critical concept of Purim is that it is the time, you know, what the Jews realized. What is the Torah really? And that's, by the way, it will be like I said, it will be the last, it will be observed even in the time of Mashiach. Because that idea is very important. You need to realize that the totality of the Torah is critical for mankind, for the Jewish people. And you can't say, well, this is for this reason, and that is for that reason. No, it is the only way mankind can survive. And the problem is, what we are now watching, of course, is an utter defiance. You see, it's an utter defiance of the plan of the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's really what's going on in America and so on. People do not want to be governed by God at all, you see, and therefore there's a tremendous amount of, whether it be judicial reform or in America, where it's a Democratic Party that wants to be communist and so on. Ultimately, it's a tremendous defiance of God and his system of justice, holiness, and righteousness and so on, you see, you know. So that's basically what it is. I mean, there's many things I didn't go into, you know, and so on. You know, I don't know, I didn't tell you about Haman, why God hates them so much. You want to hear that?
Yeah.
Why the Rebbe Hashem hates Haman so much? It's a very, very important concept. And it illustrates the universal tendency of man. What is that? Mankind has an ultimate dilemma. What is the dilemma? Everybody hates authority. Nobody wants to be told what to do. I mean, without getting into the whole history, every person, whether he knows it or not, and we see that in the Torah, mankind is at war with God. Why? Because God is the authority. God tells you what he wants, and you have to listen. People don't want to do what God wants. They don't want to do that at all. In fact, if you look at it, the Torah, mankind is basically preoccupied, even though they don't realize that, with one of three things. Either they think they are God, that's what they think, or they want to become God, or they want to kill God. It's one of those three, and you find that in the Torah. Adam Arishan, what was his desire? To be God. He wanted to eat from the tree, and like the Nachash said, the snake, V'yisim Kelokim, and you'll be like God. That was his desire, to be God. Right? Then you had the Dor HaMabel. They wanted to war with God and kill God. Then you had Paro, who says, I am God. You see, why is that? I mean, it's really a very important psychological conversation. But mankind is obsessed with being his own authority. Don't tell me what to do, and so on. That's why people have a hard time getting a job, having a boss, getting married, whatever. It's all about authority. That's what it is. Now, one of the most difficult things that a person has is, if I believe in God, I got a big problem. I have to listen to what he says, right? But I don't want to listen to what he says. I want to be my own authority. It's an unconscious war that goes on. I mean, there's a great deal you can talk about this, because it's a profound psychological insight into human behavior. The desire to be your own authority. But in any case, it's the root of gaiva and so on. So what does he do? A person who is religious has a real problem, because you believe in God. If you believe in God, you got a big problem, because you got to listen to God. Now listen to God. I don't want to tell him to tell me what to do. You see? Now, a great deal of the world is religious. They have a real problem. It sounds funny, but you don't realize how fundamental that is to the psyche of humans. Okay, and it's a great deal of what you can say more and so on. So what does he do? I will tell you the resolution to this. So what do people do, right? What do they do? So since mankind is brilliant, they came up with a resolution. What is the resolution? In English it's called, you can have your cake and eat it too. How? So every religion, and I'm going to show you 10 of them, everyone has religion, major religions of the world have resolved this problem, where they can believe in God and they can do whatever they want. What's the solution? It's called an exit. In some way they are able to exit the code of authority and so on of God. Let's take a look what the resolutions are. And then you'll understand why God hates Haman. And you'll understand all the questions I asked, why he even bothered the war with the Jews. What are the solutions? Well, let's take a look. First solution, atheism. I don't believe in God. So therefore I have no problem, right? I don't believe in God, I have no problem. I do what I want. So atheism is a solution. And by the way, that is a solution that many people do in order to do whatever they want. It's a real solution. That's why you have these societies. I don't want to go into the whole thing. They're skeptics, they're atheists. And they do whatever they want, and they feel okay. But a lot of people realize, that doesn't make any sense. Of course there has to be a God. You have any idea what the probability of developing by chance an insulin molecule? It's impossible. It's 10 to the 80 zeros. I tell you, to illustrate that. So therefore they become not atheists, they become agnostics. What do they say? I don't know if there's a God or not. But until you prove it to me, I'm going to do whatever I want. That's called agnosticism, which means I don't know, right? So they can do whatever they want because nobody can prove to them that there's a God. You really can, by the way. I would show you how. But anyway, that's what they ultimately believe. So they are agnostics, right? Then there's Aristotle. Aristotle solved the problem. How? Because he said, of course there's a God, but that God has nothing to do with the human race. Nothing. He created the world, right? And he vacated. He's on vacation, right? So basically, if that's the case, he's not even looking at me. I can do whatever I want. So that's Aristotle's God. There was a solution. God has nothing to do with mankind, right? Very nice solution. Okay, fine. Then there's the fourth resolution, right? Well, God is limited. He's limited. He doesn't know everything, right? I can't do everything. And there's a guy who wrote a whole book, why bad things happen to good people, or why, and so on. Some guy, I forgot the guy's name, Kushner, whatever. He wrote a whole book showing that God is limited. I don't want to get into why he did that and so on, but he said that God is not omniscient. He doesn't know everything. So guess what? You could do whatever you want, and he doesn't know. There you are. What an exit. Brilliant exit. It's murderous. But anyway, that's what he did. So that's the fourth exit. You see? Then you have the fifth exit. Well, there are two gods. There's a God of good, and there's a God of bad. Persians, right? Zoroastrianism. There's whatever they call Ahura Mazda, and Ahura this, Ahura that, whatever, and so on, there are two gods, a God of good and God of evil. So guess what? I'm going to ally myself with the God of evil, and therefore he protect me from the God of good. So again, I have my defender. So that's a resolution. By making two gods, one of good, the other of evil, you join the God of evil. You could do whatever you want. You see? That's the Persian God. Typical of Persia. In any case, so that's number 5. Anybody keeping track? You should, because it's brilliant what these guys do. Then there is that's number 4. Then there's number 5, where there's not two gods, there's many gods, polytheism. Now, if you have many, many gods, everybody has his own shita, his own view. So what you do is you pick the kula of this guy, this god, and the kula of that god, you can do whatever you want, because if you add up all the leniencies, guess what? You come out with a system that you can basically do what you want. That's what polytheism allows you. Today you're worshiping Zeus, and then tomorrow it's like Diana and all this kind of stuff, right? And between them all, they all have tremendous leniencies. You see? That's what polytheism does for you. It gives you a whole battery of ways of living that you can basically pick and choose who you want to live according to. So that's number 5. You see. I think it's 5. Anyway. Yeah? Okay. Then you have number 6. What's that? Where you make the God himself have all the vices you want. It's brilliant. That's what the Greeks did. They had their gods running around raping women. What's the problem here? So obviously if they can do it, why can't I do it? See? So what they did is they invested the evil conduct that they wanted, they put it in their gods. And the proof of that, you ever read Greek mythology? What the gods were doing, It's having a heyday. So if that's the case, why can't I do it? They're doing it. I can certainly do it. Brilliant idea, you see. So the gods are immoral. I certainly can be immoral. So that is number 6, whatever. Then you have number 7, where they make the avodah itself immoral. That's Baal Peor, for instance, That's why you find many times religious rites are invested with orgies. And the orgy is part of the avodah. It's part of the worshiping God. But wait a minute, this is immoral. How do you worship God with an act of immorality? No problem. But that's an exit, you see. So that's what they do, you see. And by the way, that's what Muslims do, They have their God saying Jews have to be killed. If that is, then it's a mitzvah to kill a Jew. They actually put in the mouth of their God in the Quran where it says there's a Jew hiding behind a tree, go kill him. That means it's a mitzvah to kill a Jew. They actually made their Bible have that type of murder. Again, that's the exit, you see, right? So you have that and so on, right? And then you have, God realized that mitzvahs are too hard to do. So he dropped it. Christianity. He's like, we can't do this. We have to have the charot on this. We don't have to do all these mitzvahs. It's called replacement theory. He replaced the Jew with the Gentile, right? And he replaced the whole Torah, like Yeshu says, verily I do not come to abrogate the law of Moses. And then he proceeded to abrogate the law of Moses. It's exactly what he did. Everything was nixed and so on. So that's another, was that number 8, I think, right? Okay. And then we have another aspect of Christianity, which is really remarkable, where the priest can atone for you. Man can actually atone for your sin to God. You see? Confession. What is confession? Where the priest, man, has the ability to offer you a kapara. It's like the guy, comes to the priest and says, I stole, I committed this sin. So he said, okay, you committed this sin, you got to give me at least 1 horse. Payment. That's what they did. It's called indulgences. And then they hopped and said, wait a minute. If I could charge what you did, why can't I charge what you will do? So the priest can now tell the guy, okay, here's the story, I want 2 horses, so here's what you can do. On credit, you now can commit another sin, right? But pay me now for the confession of what you're going to do in the future. Yeah, it became ridiculous. That's one of the reasons why Luther went crazy. Indulgences for the future. So everything can be forgiven in the future. You see, it's brilliant when you think about that. What does that show you? That mankind is always looking for exits. In order to do what? To be able to believe in God and somehow do whatever you want. So they can commit the most heinous deeds, all with the haskama, all with the agreement of God. And on the contrary, with the blessings of God. That's why religions, many of them, are so ruthless. I mean, you talk about what the Christians did in the Spanish Inquisition and all the you can't believe what kind of a religion is butchery, where they take a guy without charge and keep him there for the next 8 years. It's just incredible what these people did, all in the name of God. They didn't feel guilty. What's the problem here? You see? And that caters to that. So what do we see? Judaism is the only religion. Why did Nimrod hate Avram Avinu? Why did he hate Avram Avinu? He threw him into the Kessin. He threw him into the fire. Why did he hate? I'll tell you why he hated. Because Avram Avinu said, there's no exit. You need to observe, obey God, and there's no way to get around it. God is moral, right? He's moral, he's just, doesn't take bribes, right? Never changes his mind. So it's too bad. And Nimrod said, excuse me, what? You tell me I have no exit on this? That person is the most dangerous person in the world because he counters, right, the belief in man that I am supreme. And the way I will solve the conflict is by providing an exit. So Avram Avinu, he said there's only one God, not many, so you can't do that as an exit, right? And he is righteous. He doesn't take bribes. And you are accountable to him. You can't fool around with him. And that was a very, very dangerous. And that's why Nimrod wanted to kill Avram Avinu, you see. This is the problem of mankind, this concept of an exit, you see. So I just provided with you 10 different ideas, religions, these are different religions by different people of how mankind has solved the problem. You see, who realized this? That any nation that has this type of view is the most dangerous nation in the world. Because we all become slaves to God. We can't get rid of him in any way. Who realized that the Jews are coming out with a shita, which is the worst shita of all, because they provide us with no exit? And the answer is Amalek. That's what the Amalek is real. Of course, why do you go to war? You know, and they believe in religion just like you. No, but they don't provide an exit. You see, and we cannot tolerate a religion that has no exit. It's the same concept as Avram Avinu and what do you call it? Nimrod. Same idea, and that's why he threw Avram Avinu into the Kessin, because there was no exits. You see, very dangerous. So Amalek said it's worth to go to war, even though it means suicide, to kill this nation, because we must kill their belief system. We cannot allow that. And you see, the Rabbi Shem actually says that. He says, Ki yod al kes ko, right? Ki yod, the hand of Amalek, al kes ko, is on the seat. Kes is a contraction of kisei, on the throne of God, right? It doesn't say that the hand of Amalek is on the God himself. No, the hand of Amalek is on the sovereignty, the throne of God. In other words, they believe in God, but they have an exit. That's what Mamish what says in the Torah. Therefore, to God, the most dangerous people in terms of religion is Amalek, because they make a mockery of religion. What do you mean? You're going to believe in me, and then behind my back, or whatever you think is my back, you do whatever you want. What is this? It's a mockery. It's a chayzik, as they say in Hebrew, you see? And God said, it's one thing if you're an atheist. I can live with an atheist, because eventually he'll wake up. But these guys, they believe in God, yet they chopped his legs off, as they say. They denied his authority, and that means they'll never do tshuva. And if they influence the human race for this belief, as they say, it's ochem vei, because anybody can believe in God and do whatever they basically want. Who is the modern day Amalek? Who? Besides many of the people, you know, everybody has a heta, you know, everybody has a permission. Everybody attempts to neutralize God in some way. But there's some people that have a whole belief system. I just pointed out 10 different ways to get it done. And the answer is Hitler. Hitler was not an average person. He's a bright guy, you see. And what did Hitler do? before he did what he did, he had to justify what he's about to do. And what is the justification? He wrote Mein Kampf in 1923. Mein Kampf, my struggle. What did he write in that book? He says exactly why he hates the Jews. He says, the Jews have made us into wimps. They made us weaklings because they have no exit. They gave us a conscience. So what are we going to do? We can't violate any of God. That's what, because the Germans believed in the Aryan race, Supermen, Nietzsche and so on, You can't tell me I have to listen to God all the time. So he actually says, the Jews have made mankind into wimps. They gave them a conscience. And now we can't do what we want. That's exactly what Amalek, right? And therefore, the need to destroy the Jews became paramount in Hitler's eyes. That's why you find, which is incredible, that Hitler knew he was losing the war. You see? In fact, at the end of the war, there's a book called The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by Guy Scheirer. It was a very interesting book. Like 1,300 pages. I read it as a yeshiva guy. And in there he writes certain very fascinating ideas. One of them is the generals came over to Hitler at the end of the war and said, by the way, we're losing. So Hitler said, what's the problem? So they said, the problem is that instead of taking all the railroad cars and shipping the troops to the front, what are you doing? You're shipping all the Jews to the concentration camps. You're not even allowing us to take troops to the front. You see? And we know why. He became obsessed with killing every last Jew. In fact, they were losing the war because of what Hitler, the obsession of Hitler. It's incredible. And you know what Hitler told the generals? Get lost. The destruction of the Jewish people was more important than the 1,000-year Third Reich that he wanted to build. He's like, who does that sound like? Amalek. They're willing to commit suicide. Don't cut off my loophole, my exits. You can't do that. Every religion has to have a loophole so we can do what we want. That is Hitler. Germany is Amalek. That's how you know. The belief system of Germany, Nazism, right, is the concept of Amalek and so on. That's why you look at this, like the war with Ukraine and Putin, Putin is what? Putin, he believes in Christianity. He's a Roman Catholic, or I should say a Russian Orthodox Catholic and so on. What do you mean? So why are you killing all these people and so on, Because he somehow found a heter. He found an exit. Every religion offers you some type of exit. The only religion that doesn't offer you a heter, an exit, is Judaism. That's why they hate the Jews. And you really see this in Chazal. Gemara asks, why does Har Sinai, the mountain Sinai, called Har Sinai? So the Gemara answers, because from Mount Sinai at the giving of the Torah, right, the world entered hatred of God, hatred of the Torah. That's why. Why? Why should they hate the Torah? Because of Har Sinai. And the answer is, no exit. There's no exit in the Har Sinai. Everybody's accountable to God. He doesn't take bribes. He's only one God. See, that's too bad. So Sinah is what entered because of Har Sinai. And by the way, that's the real origin, almost, of anti-Semitism. The real origin of anti-Semitism is that the Jew represents the message of God, that you can't do anything of what you want to do, it's all my will. And that's, by the way, every time you look in the Torah when Moshe Rabbeinu brings a mitzvah, it always says, and Moshe did as the Lord commanded. Why? Why is the Torah always saying as God commanded? Because Moshe Rabbeinu never did anything on his own. There was no exits with Moshe. He did exactly what God wanted, and the Torah is always saying, and Moshe did exactly what God wanted. No exits, because that's what Judaism is, and that's why there's anti-Semitism. Why do people hate the Jews? And Hitler was right, because the Jews introduced ethics, morality, righteousness, holiness to the world, and there's no exit. You see, and that's what Amalek wanted. You see, they needed an exit, and it was worth for them to get themselves killed in this insane war in order for the Jews. And now we understand, right? Haman. Really understand Haman. When Haman saw that this guy Mordechai doesn't bow in front of him, he said, that doesn't make sense. What he should do, right, even if he doesn't believe that you should bow in front of a person, right, but right now, I'm the Grand Vizier. You think it would pay for him to bow to me. So why can't he find an exit? Even if his religion says, don't do it. He doesn't? He doesn't find an exit? Who is this guy? He's a Jew. So Haman said to himself, a Jew, my ancestors, right, Amalek, they went to kill the Jews because there was no exit. So these guys still exist. I got to kill them all. That's why he wanted to kill every Jew, because every Jew reminds people there's no exit. So what he basically is saying, I got to fulfill the mission of my ancestors, Amalek. And therefore I have to kill every Jew, which is incredible when you think about that. And that's what he told Achashverosh. He said, they're not like us. What do you mean like us? There's 126 other religions. Yeah, but all of them have an exit, because that's what religions do. The Jews have no exit. So we got to kill them, because we cannot allow this type of a belief system to dominate mankind. You see, that was his argument to Achashverosh. And Achashverosh agreed, you see, because Haman is an Amaleki, and he is carrying on the what? The tradition of Amalek, his great ancestor. And now you know why the Megillah is always mentioning the yichus of Haman. Every time it says, there's Haman, Ben Hamdasa, Amaleki, what are you always saying it over and over again? It's like every time you say Haman, you got to mention his ancestors. Because what the Megillah is telling you, by the way, that's exactly what he's doing to fulfill the tradition and the mission of his great ancestors, the Amalekis. That's exactly why Haman wanted to kill the Jews. You know, you can't have a religion that stops you from doing what you want. All mankind will agree to that. You see? And each religion is nothing more than a study of how they did it, how they created an exit. That's all it is. The only religion that doesn't have an exit, and that's why they hate it so much, is the Jewish people and their religion. That's really the real cause of anti-Semitism. You know, don't tell me what to do. I want to do what I want to do. So don't tell me there's no exit, you know, and so on, you know. But anyway, so that's really what was behind Haman. It's why the Amalekis wanted to kill all the Jews. You see, because they could not tolerate a religion that allows no exit. Can't have that, you see. So that's really why Haman did what he did, and so on, and why God hates Amalek so much. It's one thing if you're an atheist, but it's another thing if you're an atheist, right? You're not an atheist, you believe in God, except you defy God, do whatever you want, because you've incorporated in your religion some basis for a loophole. It's chayzik, it's a mockery, you see? And therefore God says, that type of religion cannot exist. That's exactly what Hitler was, Germany, and all the religions of mankind. So that's really what the uniqueness about Judaism really is. Because it all stems from what? From the basic desire of man to overthrow God. That's the root of all evil, you see. Except they won't admit that. They say, well, we do believe in God. Yeah, but I'm going to provide an exit, you see. And that's the real concept of Amalek, you know, as I showed you, you know. Okay, we'll now go to Purim.
Questions?
Yeah.
Thanks, first of all, for very entertaining and enlightening lecture.
Enlightening. If it's entertaining, you got to pay entertaining prices.
So you mentioned that.
So we're selling movie tickets.
You mentioned that Esther was a little green.
Yeah, the Chazal says.
And you didn't know why.
Green complexion.
Well, I think I can enlighten you in that as a doctor. In the
A
late
doctor of?
medicine,
No, I know that. Which specialty?
everything.
Wow.
Family
Okay.
medicine.
What?
Family medicine, general medicine.
Okay.
So in the late 1800s in England, there was, I think it was, someone who, there were a lot of young women swooning, fainting, and the reason was anemia.
Okay.
And the name was given of chlorosis for this disease.
Yeah.
Why? Because we know chlorophyll in plants that make them nice and green. And there isn't enough, they become yellowish. But in actual fact, these women had this sort of greenish tinge. And the reason was lack of iron. And that's chlorosis, that was the name.
Okay. Okay.
So Esther probably is a young woman and may have had that problem.
Very nice. You know? Wow. Yeah.
Why is it we have to remember to forget Amalek? I mean, what is the whole concept of this?
No, you have to remember to destroy him. God does not want even a memory of Amalek. You see, in fact, if you have a cow that used to belong to an Amaleki, you had to kill the cow. Why? What did the cow do? Because the guy can point out and say, yeah, that's interesting. You know, that cow used to belong to a neighbor of mine who was an Amaleki. Oh, that's interesting, an Amaleki? What was unusual about Amalek? Because you'll come to talk about his philosophy. That's how dangerous that philosophy is to mankind. Very dangerous.
If God created this situation and it doesn't vanish, then what is the whole purpose of it?
He didn't create the situation. They chose to do that. They chose to be that way. You know what I'm saying? They have free will.
So why does Hashem says that his arms on the piece of his chair?
Well, his hand is against the sovereignty of God because they have exits. They're not against God. They're against his sovereignty. That's the problem, you see. And they want to destroy the sovereignty, you see. By the way, it says, Ki yod al keis ka. The hand of Amalek is against the throne of God. There's three letters that are missing, right? Keis is missing an aleph, because it should be kisei, and ka is missing yud hey, vav hey. Three letters. And therefore the word v'nahapoich hu, hey, vav, aleph, was restored after Purim.
What was restored?
Interesting, huh? The v'nahapoich, what was overturned? The hu, hey, vav, aleph, which are the three missing letters of Kesko. Interesting. What a remez, huh? Right.
So Amalek won't exist in times of Mashiach.
What?
Amalek will be destroyed.
Yes.
For times of Mashiach.
Right. Yeah.
By Mashiach.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. Right. You know. At the end of what?
At the end of the capture of some of these Nazi criminals, they were hung. And there was one man,
Streicher.
yes,
Julius Streicher.
okay,
And he said Purim Fest.
yeah.
Right. He was an Amaleki.
He was an Amalek and he knew, I mean,
And he knew, apparently, nobody really knows why he said Purim Fest before they hung him. But apparently he realized there were 10 people hung,
right,
the 10 sons of Haman.
right,
Yeah,
and he knew that.
right. There's a whole understanding what that means, right?
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And Iran is the modern day Amalek now.
No, Iran is Ishmael. He's Ishmael. Okay.
Okay, shkoyach.